Okay, hi friends, welcome and thank you for being with Josh Stiles and I. He's the owner and founder of Shamma Sandals. And so we have a conversation to have today. And the reason why we're having this conversation, because he's already had a conversation about Shamma Elite Performance Sandals with Nick. And and that's wonderful. But what happened was I overlapped with Nick a little bit, and unannounced, I was visiting Santa Cruz, which is where the warehouse is located and where they make these beautiful shoes. And I stopped by unannounced, and the generosity and the welcome that Matthew, my partner, and I received when we got there it floored me, to be honest. My heart starts to beat a little faster even now. Oh no. I'm just going to pull myself together, because you just don't have that very often anymore, in like real life. So I'm not going to stop the recording. I'm just going to pull myself together. But I really was astonished and amazed at how, Josh, you spent so much time with us. So for those of you listening, we had a visit to Santa Cruz, and Matthew and I stopped in at the warehouse, and they were putting together a shoe order of 1,000 pairs to send to Germany. And in the middle of all of that chaos, Josh and his team had a visit with Matthew and I, and not only did they visit with us for 2 hours, show us around, they also handmade our shoes while we waited there and sent us on our way. And that is moving to me because I just don't experience that. Maybe I'm sheltered or something, but I feel like our human family doesn't get to experience that kind of generosity. I mean, in my world, people hardly even go into it. I live in a condo complex and I love my neighbors, and nobody ever goes inside their house, and especially unannounced. So to be welcomed in that way was extraordinary. And so I wanted to have a conversation with you specifically for myself and for my community and the community at the Foot Collective, because it's extraordinary what you're doing there. So welcome, Josh, and thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. And I think a good place to start for me, because I know you already discussed a lot in detail about Shamma, the brand name, where it comes from, the warehouse, and all that. So I kind of wanted to dig into some of the other conversations around Shamma Sandals. And the first one is
Really quick, Ruth, thank you
yes,
for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to hang out with your community. I think this is awesome. Really excited to do it.
yeah. Okay, so why Shamma? So I know that Shamma is your middle name, and I kind of just want to start there. Like, can we just
Sure.
talk about that for a second? Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, my middle name was always like a some kind of burden or something I was afraid of my whole life because in school I grew up. See, I started going to elementary school like in about 1985, and you didn't want to have a weird name, and you certainly didn't want to have a weird middle name, and so I was always worried about that, and being made fun of and stuff like that because kids are ruthless, they are brutal, and in any case, so I was always like at the beginning of the school year when they'd call it your whole name like the first time. It's like, oh no, it's happening again. They're gonna know my middle name is Shamma. I didn't even know what it meant, and I just kind of like it was there, and I always kept it a secret if I could. Probably through college and into um, graduate school, I would say I didn't
Mhm.
really uh, care to mention it too much when I was in graduate school. So I did my first, let's see, my BA was in business. I had a minor in psychology, and then I went on from there. And Ruth, it's a funny thing, but you actually we were like neighbors. Our paths crossed years ago, and we didn't even realize it. So my dad started this thing called New Life Community Services. It's a drug and alcohol treatment program. it has a strong association with the church. And I worked there when I was younger, different capacities. I do maintenance, or then sometimes I was an on-site manager, things like that. It wasn't really what I wanted to do, but I've just lived in that whole treatment environment. Well, I ended up going to this place called Western Seminary the first time to get a marriage and family therapy degree, a master's in marriage and family therapy. Uh, and Western is a seminary, so there was biblical classes, and I took those along. You have to take probably 30 units of it as you're getting your marriage and family therapy degree. And I did that. I got to the end of it, and I really didn't want to be a therapist. I don't. It's been helpful, helps me understand.
Mhm.
It's been great. I like it.
Why'd you start that degree?
Oh, basically, like everyone's supposed to go to graduate school, and my
Exactly.
family, whatever, okay, you're supposed to do something now.
Yes,
And
yes.
I'm like, all right. And my boss at the time, Emmanuel, you might have known him then. I don't know if you knew him then or not.
I don't
He
know.
was like one of the directors there, and he's like, just like I'll fill out all the paperwork, just sign your name, and we'll go to graduate school. I'm like, fine, let's do it, whatever. Because I'm like in my early 20s. What else are you
Yep.
gonna? And so I went there, and it was brutal. It was really hard work, and the Bible classes were especially hard. And I really loved those. And so I went back after I got my MFT. I was like, I don't want to be a therapist. I'd like to be a pastor. I was even thinking maybe I wanted to be a scholar type person and just study.
Hmm.
Sounds like your husband Matthew is also a scholarly type.
Hmm. He's a
So
scholarly dude.
a scholarly dude, and reading books and writing papers and things like that's what I thought maybe I would do. That wasn't the right path for me either. Um, but in seminary, so I have four daughters, and as we were choosing names, it's important to me to know what the name actually means. And so my oldest daughter is Naomi, and it's a biblical name, and it's your counterpart in
Yep.
scripture. There's Naomi and Ruth, and Naomi's probably sweetness, and I honestly don't know what Ruth means. And you've told me before, right?
I think they said it's friend, but I can't be for certain, but I
That
like
that
it. I like that if it is.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. It does. Usually you have contrasting characters and names.
Mhm.
And so the Hebrew words were, again, I've taken Greek, I've taken Hebrew now, and I'm just kind of learning a little bit. And so I'm learning that most of the names are just words in Hebrew. And then my second daughter, Danielle, is God, is El, and Dan means judge. So God is my judge. And then the next daughter, Hannah, grace or favor or kindness. And then Abigail, my fourth, is Abba is father and joy. It's something like her father's joy. And I love the concept of
Yeah.
that, and in different times I've had hard times in my life, and having your daughters there and sit on the couch with you is like a wonderful thing. Um,
Hmm.
so,
Wow.
and Abby's just, she's so sweet. She's so sweet. And they're all sweet. And Naomi is sweetness too. They're just different.
Oh,
But
that's amazing.
so, anyways, I just kind of like, I think it was like 2010, and I got into the minimalist thing.
Hmm. Wait,
And
how did you even, did you play sports? Like, how did you even, what's your background in like your movement practice?
Well, I've always loved sports. So I think really when it comes down to it, going back to like what I ended up doing now, I'm a very eclectic person. I worked with my hands. My dad was just a lot of people that knew him, and he's still around and going like crazy. Um, he's a
How
rent,
old?
I think mid 70s. I'm not sure exactly how old he is
Doesn't
anymore.
matter.
Yeah, mid to late 70s. I think he's actually 75, 76. Um, but people would call him a Renaissance man because while he was doing this, he had a church that he was running, pastoring. He had a
Mhm.
treatment program. He was, he, he developed a course for drug and alcohol treatment at a local college. And so he ran that program. And he also, to make ends meet earlier on, he He had an auto body shop out here in the woods.
That was going to be one of my questions about like your tinkering and your
Yeah.
love of cars and stuff. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So he was always working on cars. He did that to pay bills early on. And then he, at some point, he was doing too many things to do that too. But he was always involved with some sort of physical project or whatever, even to his own detriment, we'll say. If you focus on something, you can do a better job with it. But some people's minds aren't settled enough for that. Like they're
Mhm.
just too busy. They got a lot to do, and that's who he is, and it's a lot of who I am too. Uh, there's there's good and there's bad in it.
Of course.
So I'm a I I was handy with tools and all that. I was fortunate enough to meet some different people that taught me stuff, and I did construction for probably 10 to probably 15 years of like that was how I was making money. And even while I was doing sandals at the early stages. um, so I've always kind of worked with my hands and had to be able to, like, when you do construction, we'll call it remodel, is probably a better term for it. You just have to use different tools and processes all the time. You
Mhm.
never know what's next, and you have to learn, okay, so the customer wants to do this kind of material on the wall. You're going to have to learn how to use those tools and how to apply that stuff. You read the directions and you figure it out. A lot of it's like a muscle memory thing, and you have to like kind of train your body. It's nothing incredible. Lots of people do this all the time, but I just took that idea when I started Shamma. Like, I didn't know how to sew. I'm pretty good at sewing now. I'm not the greatest, but I can jump on a lot of machines and sew. And it's just something you have to learn and be okay learning.
Mhm.
That was, I've got a mosquito flying around.
Oh, mosquitoes are eating me alive right now. Can't even tell you. Oh my gosh, whole other topic.
Yes.
I'm
It's
in the South, I'm in the Southern United States and it's super humid and they are just feasting on me.
yes.
Um, but Josh, so I'm sure that you probably covered this with Nick, but I haven't actually heard it. So why the sandals? So the average person, average runner, would think it would be absurd to run or hike in a pair of sandals. So why not? Like, why did you end up designing the sandal, not like a traditional tennis shoe or something?
Well, Ruth, the funny thing is, and I've learned this with the podcast, I've been on a few now, I get derailed so quick. And I didn't even tell you why Shama or what it means.
Well, one thing I did learn from what you were saying is that names were not important. Well, you were trying to hide the name,
I
and
was
then
trying
the
to hide it.
name. Yeah, you didn't tell me what it meant. I was trying to respect your privacy in case you didn't want
You're
to
good.
say.
No, no,
But
you're good.
what I
Gotten over
gathered
it.
from all that was that it was initially something to be hidden, and then when you had your four daughters, you realized the importance of the name, and then
Yeah,
like how it gradually became important to you. So please go back
yeah.
to the Shama.
Oh, yes, because I just feel like I end up going and something else happens and I spin off somewhere else. So I'll just say that I have my daughters. I was doing construction. I started Shama. We'll get back to that, or I was
Okay.
trying to start it, and I needed a name, and I was thinking of all these different names, and I was like, well, not to be arrogant or weird or whatever, but my name's weird. It'll work for a business, and it has a good meaning for people that want to find it. But it's basically, so there was this guy. All these names I gave to my kids were biblical, and so the name my dad gave me was biblical as well. And but I just didn't know what it meant. But King David in the book of Second Samuel has one of these fighting men, one of his warriors, and the important ones they'll talk about, and he gets a little blurb, and one of them's name was Shammah. Um, and so a lot of these names are kind of derivative. And as far as I can tell, and there might be some Hebrew scholar out there that'll disagree with me, and that's fine. But what I think it is, it's the verb to hear. That's part of their great prayer, which is Deuteronomy 6:4, which says, "Hear, O Israel." It's just the verb, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord your God is one." And that's the start of their great prayer. And so if you were, say, like in our day and age, if you wanted to name your kid something that was patriotic, you might name your kid Liberty or Independence or something like
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
And it's the same kind of idea. And so them, I'm pretty sure it was a nod to their greatest prayer. And so I came to understand what that meant, and I think it's good.
Mhm.
And so it's the Hebrew verb to hear, and it's a reference to Deuteronomy 6:4. So I thought, well, for those people that want to find it, it's like an Easter egg, and there you go. That's what Shamma means.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's an Anglicanized writing of it. I'll put that in there too. It's clearly not, written in Hebrew, and
Mhm,
they kind of massage the words, and we massage the words in Scripture so that we
mhm.
can read them.
Sure.
Just a little point.
But I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, this is probably a topic for a whole other hour-long podcast about like feet and what they represent and like all the things that happen with feet and humility in biblical stories. Now, I grew up Catholic, and then, well, I should say, my family is and was Catholic, and I identify most with that religion just because that's what I know. But I do
Sure.
not like being in church at all. I
Yeah,
feel
fair enough.
caged, and so I have in actually the Foot Collective in the year-long program that doesn't exist anymore, the Foot Nerd program. We do a whole lesson on death, spirituality, and meditation, and we talk, there's like four of us, our foot nerds, who talk about like our experience with
Yeah.
religion in our life and how spirituality, religion, whatever word that works best so that you don't reject it, how that plays into our health, our
Yeah.
whole body and health. And so anyway, this is a great conversation for that. But I guess what I wanted to say is that I keep reflecting on how the health of my feet and what I'm doing in the Foot Collective with a background in kinesiology and kind of the path I was going down in strength and conditioning and stuff led me to this very beautiful company where we focus on lower limb health starting at the feet. And then I'm starting to read more about like with female scholars, because it's not that I don't like being, I do love God and universe and creator, or whatever you think of it. Like I have a soul with a relationship to it, but I also I'm repelled by what I see around me. So I started looking in, and I always was like, well, where are the ladies? What's going on with the ladies when all this stuff is happening? And I see like how women, um, women, we're amazing creatures and we have a role to play, important roles to play in life. And I was like, we don't really talk so much. So I started looking into more deeply, like what was going on with the women. And that's kind of where I am now, like just a little, I'm like a baby. I'm a naive little baby when it comes to religion and scholarly religion, but I am starting to dig into like, ooh, this is getting good.
There's a lot.
Um,
There's
there's a
it's
lot.
a deep well, a very deep well.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, well, it's a good pursuit. And I think maybe like when you think about Shama a little bit, and our, not the name, but the company, and like
Hmm.
one of my goals, and you asked me earlier, like, why do I want to do this podcast with you?
Hmm.
And I think that, my concern lately in the last couple years, I see some really troubling things for humanity. And like, I was talking with Nick, and he was like, well, there's, he sees like, oh, we're on the cusp of something really big here with, like there was athleisure, and now there's, these different like kind of fads or movements in the clothing we wear and all that. And I go, well, I actually think it's way, way deeper than that.
Hmm.
And it connects to what you're saying. And I really think that like we are on a, right now we're in a place as humanity where we're trying to um, some people are trying to like take us away from our roots of being
Mhm.
human, whether they are doing it um, maliciously or it's just an accident or whatever. We're just caught up in technology and this, that, and the other thing. Um, I just think that I consider it modernity.
Yeah.
And in modernity, we've basically kind of rejected anything that we can't. Um, I guess we're just saying that we look at the world as a bunch of problems, and that we've got science now, and that they can fix the problems. And science is great. I use
Mhm.
it all the time. A lot of
Yep.
technology, we're using it as we speak. I'm not a Luddite, none of those things. I embrace it. But I think the new place that we're going is a complete person, hopefully, a healthier person, a person. I like,
Mhm.
I listened to Nick's podcast. He was talking with Anya from Anya's reviews, and they were using the word human a lot. And I
Yeah.
just think that we need to be human. We're, we're,
Yes.
we're like all enamored with the cyber world, and we're enamored with um, kind of shedding all of the physical constraints, or the not even constraints, like difficulties. Like that's what the shoe is. Like the modern shoe is like, this is freedom from pain. You'll never feel pain again, or whatever. Like pain is actually so essential to our life. And people that shed pain and avoid it, those are the most dead people you're gonna find.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. It's sad. We have to. The pain is
No.
part of like our feedback loop. We need it.
Yes.
Critical. We also need our families. We need our communities. We need to move. We need our faith. We
Yeah.
need our religion.
Well,
I
and
think
it's
that a
funny
lot of it.
because
Go ahead.
you asked me if we share some like recommendations for films and stuff, which I won't go into right now. But one of the things that I think I heard recently, because I grapple with being in my 50s and
Yeah.
still living like not like other 50 people in their 50s
Sure.
in the world. Um, and so you were talking about like, so like that's one of the things we talk about at the Foot Collective all the time is like pain is a signal that is extraordinarily useful. Um, and part of our human experience that you're going to end up, the only way out is through, which is
Yeah.
one of the things that one of my teachers says. And I believe that to be true. And we have to, in one of the yoga classes that I used to take, they say like you have to get comfortable with in the discomfort. Like you have to
Yeah.
find comfort in the discomfort of being human. And
Yeah.
then the other thing that recently just really moved me, because I'm always like a little bit like itchy to get, I don't know, to get out of here or to get happier, or
Yeah.
when the fact is that the most beautiful part of like I think of who I feel I am as a human is like it's filled with pain and grief and also love, and there's the same different sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. It creates beauty. But I loved one of the teachers that said our body, so I keep like thinking like, why feet? Why am I doing, I always try to clarify, why am I so involved with the feet?
Yeah.
And like feet on the ground, I'm always like trying to fly away somewhere else better. And I realized that when she said our human body is our sacred chance to be here,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh my god, that is, like it just immediately kind of makes me feel more in my body. And you can't do that without feeling, I don't care if it's concrete or carpet or tile or grass, or I mean I don't care where you are. You don't have to go into nature. Like you can live in New York City, but taking off your shoes, feeling your feet on the ground is a
Yeah.
very powerful thing.
I agree with that. It's very connected, and I've been going through. I still do construction all the time. I'm working on my house. I'm not super wealthy or anything like that. Eventually, who knows, Shama, what it'll do. What in the meantime, I'm living paycheck to paycheck like the next person, and everything goes into the business and paying the employees and all that. So it came time we needed to do an addition on our house, and I'm sitting on this deck I built recently, and then we got a new dining room because we have a little place and our kids are getting big and we needed more space. In any case, I've been doing a lot of the building lately as I got into the house and I needed to like kind of tie the entryways together with the new place, and it's just a lot of like intricate work. I've been doing a lot of it barefoot. The nails are falling on the ground and this, that, and the other thing, and gnarly sawdust and splinters. I could get all that, but what I've done is I've been doing it slow. I
Yeah.
just take more time and make sure I clean up as I go and just think my way through it. It's a big job and I gotta take time, and but that's the thing is slow is another piece of right being in your body. It's like, okay, maybe it takes a little longer,
Hmm.
but was I present there for it, and am I okay? I don't know, like everything we have, it has to be so fast. We got to do it so quick,
Hmm.
and instead of experiencing where you are and enjoying it. And yes,
Yeah.
I think that that is a major. I think you could, not to get into a big religious discussion that maybe people don't want, but I do think that you have a lot of, as a Christian, there's a lot of groups, and you've seen a change even in like the evangelical world or whatever, where there's more of a focus now coming around to like, hey, we are a spirit matter composition, and things that were, I just say that world, very like bare bones for the material world. No, you're in the material world and you have to live in it, and you have to experience in it, and it's beautiful, right?
Hmm.
um, I believe God loves the material world just like he loves the spiritual world. So
You mentioned science too, and I think like I mean I agree with everything you said about embracing science. I was raised and went through school and was a scientist, and I'm actually trying to unlearn some of that teaching a little bit,
yeah,
because I think what you brought up a good point, and then we'll switch back to footwear, which is still all no,
yeah,
but these things are intimately intertwined, and maybe
yeah,
not every person will get that right away, but what we wear on our feet and what we don't wear on our feet is intimately entwined with faith and who we are and what it means to be human. So I don't want to take that away.
yeah,
But it's about like what I noticed is that like I overly fetishized science so much because of our uncertainty, right?
yeah,
So like, and I think we do that, like when you talked about modernity, I think we do that. We do that. That's what our culture is about, is like, well, it's evidence-based. It's evidence-based. If I hear somebody say evidence-based one more time, I'm going to beat the shit out of somebody.
And well,
No.
can I add this to what you're saying? This is beautiful. I heard someone say recently that the problem um, with we'll just call it the enlightenment thinking, is that and the core problem is we've laid everything at the feet of science, and science is going to lead us forward and give you the answer. Well, science actually is just a method by which we cast doubt on things. It only
Yes.
creates doubt, and that's good. And I just want
Yes.
everyone that's listening, that's a good thing. Like, it is a
Yes.
wonderful thing to re-examine. I'm always re-examining things in my life, and it's critical that we do it. But science can never bring you certainty.
Well,
It can
unless you're,
only,
I mean, like we talk about citizen scientists though, right? So like I think the problem is that we export all of our daily barefoot science to the scientists with lab coats, right? So if we
to the
talk about,
expert, to the
yeah,
experts.
to the experts, but we are citizen scientists every
Sure.
day. If you, Nick and I talked about this in another podcast, if you go to the kitchen and your toaster isn't working, you go through the scientific method in order to figure out what's wrong. First, is it plugged in? Did I
Sure.
break a circuit? Is the something in the wiring? And you get your toaster to work by
Yeah.
science. So I guess like just to come back to like overly fetishizing and exporting science to the professional world, much in the same way we do our health, right? So that we
Yeah.
don't know ourselves. And then coming back to uncertainty, it's like having a place for both the mysteries, right? So
Yeah. Absolutely.
sometimes when I realize like you say the word God and people just they just
Sure.
close off, or you say and myself included. I get very skeptical about somebody who says the word God to me initially until I'm like, is that this person safe, or what are they trying to get me to do? Or,
Yeah.
but it's only because we're so uncomfortable with the mystery of it all. So I've actually been interchanging or exchanging, the word religion or God or creator or universe for, because those are over tired words now that people just use to fight each other. And I go with like the mysteries, like I live within the questions every single day.
Yeah.
And the way that I can do that, bringing this all back to Shamma Sandals, is
Sure.
like, is either, I mean, I realized because I've been trained by Nick St. Louis as his, I was originally his assistant, and then we created, and then helped create the Foot Nerd program and create, he's just an amazing human in his heart. And then he's a really great visionary too. So, but like now I just don't want to be in shoes. Whereas my whole life, I just wanted my feet entirely covered. I was
Yeah.
ashamed of the way my feet looked. I was teased because they were too big, and I was called lurch and all the things because I was long and lanky. Because like you said, children can be ruthless, right?
They are
I didn't
ruthless.
care. I was like, bring it on. But the effect of that was that I squished my feet into too tight shoes. And it
Yep.
wasn't until I finally found the Foot Collective and started healing my feet that my knees felt better, that my hips feel better. And now in my 50s, I'm able to compete and play tennis and do the things I love. But barefoot first, like I don't want to be with shoes on. And
Yeah.
then if I can be with shoes, what I'm finding, and this is new in the last couple months, Josh, is that I don't even want the tops of my feet covered. Like, then that's because I mean, up till this day, I don't love the look of my feet. I'm starting to appreciate them more, but I have like some weird hangups about my feet. So, but now that my feet can wiggle in the Shamma sandals, my toes can do what they want to do. They have a life of their own in the field grounds I wear. I love sandals or being barefoot. So I guess I want to come back to the question about what I was saying before, which is like the average person would think it's absurd to run or hike or do construction in their dining room
Yeah.
barefoot or in sandals. So why did you engineer the sandal and not another type of shoe that was covered?
Well, great question. And I wanted to add in really quick. You talked about the citizen scientists, and that's actually, can I go back really quick? Please hang on
Yeah.
to your question. I don't want to lose this. Um, the reason, like, I want to do this podcast, and I'm so happy that the Food Collective is out there, and you've got all these different influencers and sharing. And I think it's kind of like in spite of technology, in spite of modernity. I see, I'm on Instagram all the time. Not my favorite thing in the world to do, but I've had to do it for the business and all that. But I see people like sharing their stories. I think that's the cool thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
anything, like an axe, you can use it to cut down a tree and build a house and do something beautiful with it, or you could kill somebody. Like you can, it's all about responsibility. The
Mm-hmm.
human has to be responsible for themselves and their actions and how they live their life. Um, but I think that you're seeing enough people are going, hey, there's a problem with this is why I'm saying it's more than athleisure, right? There's a problem with the things that are covering our feet. There's a problem with the food we're eating. That's like a giant thing. There's a problem with um, the medicines, pharmaceutical industry, like all these things we're starting to look, and my eyes have been opened in the last few years, like, hey, something's really wrong. I just want to be a person and live and raise my family. And it seems to me that um, there's these big, I don't know, corporations. Like I wasn't the guy against corporations in the past. I mean, our Shama is a corporation, but it's like a teeny small one or whatever. These big ones, there's big problems with
Yeah.
them and our politicians all getting together and just running people over, running our lives over, and so, anyways, I see people. This is where I want to go with it. The citizen scientist, like people, a lot of times we're faced with a lot of these different questions, and in some areas we feel like, especially with technology, we're like, oh, I understand what a computer is and how it works, and I have enough information and ability to think that I can go through and decide what's the right computer for me. We do that with weight loss a lot of times in health. We start to go, you know what, I can figure this thing out. And we are encouraged by each other's stories of how we figured it out. And that's where I wanted to go. That's the citizen
Yes.
scientist. And so at the end of the day, even when you mentally, intellectually, you can sort through something and go, you know, there's something wrong with that, and I want to live my life different. It's scary. But when you see, I've heard you need like 20% of the population to get on board with something before the other 80 follow. And so we do that with stories and, you know, living it out in our lives and all of that. And I think that's why I want to be here, and I love what you guys are doing, is because you just have to show people, hey, you can do it. Going back to why the sandals, it's weird. I know it's kind of a weird thing for people to grasp.
Mhm.
And so when I started, I was playing softball. I played baseball since I was a little kid. I loved it. I played, you know, little league, and then like the leagues after that. While I played high school, you know, I was playing, you know, on the rec leagues, and then I was different competitive stuff, and then I played softball when I got out of college. I actually got to play some baseball at the college level, which was great. It was an awesome experience. Um, and I've got, you know, little notches on my belt. Like I got to play against Santa Clara or Cal Poly. So I was at this little school for my undergrad, and they ended up with a baseball team, and it was amazing, you know.
Wow. What
So we did.
position?
I'm like a pitcher outfielder type. I
Cool.
think I have a pretty good arm. Not the greatest, but pretty good. And so, anyways, and then I was down at the La Viega, which is literally like the next mountain over from this one. It's about
Mhm.
4 or 5 minutes away. And I was playing softball there, and it was a competitive league. Most of the guys there had played. Um, most of the guys had played at least high school ball. A lot of them had played college, and there was this guy out there, and he was wearing booties. So I thought, and it's Santa Cruz, and we got stickers that say "Keep Santa Cruz Weird" and things like that. You know, you know, Ruth,
Hmm.
it's a different place, different
Yep.
breed of
We're
cat
not in
living.
Kansas anymore.
Yeah. And so I'm like, all right, he's got his booties on, but what's he trying to prove? Because we're all playing competitively and you want the best equipment. Well, it turned out he's wearing Vibram five fingers. And
Hmm.
this is like 2010. And I looked into it, and the idea, the concept just made sense right off the bat. Like, because when you play sports, it's all about your technique. How do you improve your technique to play better? Well, instantly I was like, oh, duh, you know, that's not a human foot doesn't need to be up on a wedge and then have a arch support and be jammed in this thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, the foot, it's doing all this stuff and we're stopping it. It was
So
just
that
like,
was just you saw the guy in the five fingers, and that was an intuitive process straight away.
um, no. I went home to look at it. I looked it up, and I didn't know very much at all. I just read like a paragraph, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's all I
Yeah.
needed.
Yep. Yep.
And some of these things are self-evident,
Sure.
and we need to be, maybe, like, again, that's like our, going back to the science thing, so many times we're just walking along with the dogma and afraid to, like, what does Mark Twain say? It's easier to fool somebody than to convince them that they've been fooled.
Yes.
And I find that to be very true. It's
Yes.
so hard to pry ourselves away from things that are like, that basically we've been marketed on. It's just,
Yeah.
a lot of it's just marketing.
Yeah.
You hear it enough times and you start believing it. It's sad, but it's the reality. In
So
any case,
how? Oh
oh,
yeah.
go ahead. So
No, I think you're going. I think You're going somewhere. I don't want to
yeah,
stop you.
so I talked to my father-in-law, who's also, he worked for the water department in Santa Cruz, and he's a guy that'll try anything. He was part of the Keep Santa Cruz Weird movement,
Mhm. Amazing.
unbeknownst unbeknownst to him. you know, like I think there's stories of him like he was like growing mushroom juice or something. He and so it's my wife's it, her stepdad, and they like got it's another story, but he was always trying some interesting medical, remedy kind of stuff, and he's always good for that. And I told him, and instantly, like he was in. He worked for the water department, and he looked online, and he brought this thing home from the water department. It's like a sheet of rubber. He made me some sandals. He'd heard about the sandals are a good way to be barefoot or minimalist, and he made some for me. And I sat there in awe as he was making these sandals for me. And he's like, he got the punch and he's got the paracord, and he puts them on, he ties them up. I'm like, man, he's a genius. And I put them on and I go running on Westcliff. And they were awful, awful, awful sandals. They flopped and they slapped, and they were just like barely on my feet. This is miserable.
Can I
So
interrupt you for a second? Because I have
okay.
a question before that. So how much time before you went for your first run on Westcliff in your awesome sandals,
Yes,
handmade, how much time had you been spending barefoot? Were you did you like to be barefoot before that and you just use shoes for
like a
like,
week, like a week.
okay, okay.
I don't know, something like that.
Interesting.
But I was like you. I hated to have my I didn't hate my feet. I had no problem with my feet, but I wanted them clean and in shoes. And for me, it was like a performance issue. So like I couldn't do the things I wanted to if I didn't have shoes on. And I remember I've got one story when I was a kid. So I made the all-star team for I forget if it was like minors or majors in Little League. We went to the boardwalk, and my mom was supposed to meet me at the practice, and she didn't. And I didn't have my cleats. I had just my regular shoes. And in practice, and I was so upset. I was like ready to cry. Really sad, just being a dumb kid. But I was ready to cry because I was like, I know I can't function on the field the way I want to. That was
Yeah,
critical because you need the cleats, the grip.
yeah.
And then I even like, we were doing our practice, and I hit a home run foul by like 2 feet because I slipped. I
Oh
couldn't,
no.
I was so mad at my mom, but I shouldn't have been. My mom is like she's a saint. And I've got 5 brothers. And so she worked so hard raising us and all that. And in any case,
Thanks, Mom.
yeah, thank you, Mom. Sorry I was upset. So that kind of ties back into it. Like I had to have my feet like locked in, so I'm ready to do whatever it is I'm going to do. Play baseball,
Mhm.
football, soccer.
Oh no.
Have something as thin as possible on my foot so I can move naturally. And I was like trying anything. We used to get these. Um, do you remember Mervin's, the store?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
All right. Well, my mom would always give us these moccasins for Christmas from Mervin's. Like it was just part of the annual gift giving. And so I'm like, I know. And I ripped the insole out of the moccasin, and then it's just like it was actually this really thin, probably 3 millimeter, like funky rubber plastic sole. And I ran on Westcliff in those.
No way.
Yes, yes.
So was it better?
Better than the sandals. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
this starts the like the rabbit hole of making this sandal and re-engineering it time and time again, because one of the things that I noticed that you do at Shamma is you have taken one model and then you've made a few different types of shoe, but it all stems from one perfected model, and then now you have generations of it, right?
Yes, I think of it in generations, and I like an F-150 or whatever car you want to think of. It's been an F-150 for like 50 years, but you just make it a little better,
Mhm.
improve on it. At the foundation is a Vibram sole in varying
Mhm.
thicknesses, and we've done some things like our grip top in particular. I spent a lot of time on that, getting it right. So, you know, I wanted to make something, and again, this is just me thinking through stuff. I wanted as much surface area as possible.
Mhm.
But the problem, like, on a racing car, if you've got slicks, you need a refined surface. And so cars have siping on the tires, because the terrain isn't always the same. So I just imagine in my head that your foot is the road and the sandal is actually the tire. And so,
Mhm.
for instance, in that case, it's like a flat diamond pattern, so a lot of surface area, but with relief channeling, so water and dirt can push out, can come and go. And then we micro perforate it so that it can absorb a little bit of the moisture, just like um, leather does with foot sweat. Leather's wonderful, it's just not great when it gets wet. So,
Mhm.
but my point is basically, there's the soling material, and you can kind of do whatever you can do with that, but really the the, the vast uncharted landscape is the lacing system. Like, that's the wilderness you need to conquer, so to
Mhm.
speak. So
Yeah.
it's ongoing struggle because the foot is so dynamic in its movement. It's wild, and
Yeah.
and you've got to be able to, you know, my core philosophy is complementing rather than correcting the foot. So I don't look at the foot as broken, wrong, having any problems, nothing. It has everything it needs. The biggest problem the foot has is your brain being conditioned to needing something on its foot.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that is an amazing segue to my next question about
Sure.
education, right? So when we were visiting with you, I got to meet Katie, right?
Yeah.
So Katie and I and you talked about like the role of education. So I guess my question is, people who are conditioned like our brains are, mine has been for 53 of my 56 years, about like what am I doing with my feet and how important. I never thought of my feet as being the
Yeah.
amazing magical tool that they are. um, it takes a lot of education to unlearn that conditioning. So I wanted to talk to you, like I want to wrap up our conversation
Sure.
with two questions. And the first one is about education. What role do you see education being in helping people to transition to natural footwear? And how do you envision people getting that information?
Okay. Well, I think it's kind of, I didn't quite finish the last question because you were like, how does your foot get uncovered? This is good though. I love this.
Right, right.
Though, I think they kind of work together.
Yes.
Um, and I think it all goes back to the citizen scientist concept you were talking
Yep.
about earlier. I like that, by the way. Um, I think that, well, for me, so I ran in a bunch of funky things. I finally, like, at first, I was just trying to be a cheapskate and like pull apart my moccasins
Mhm.
and like cut things down on my shoes just to put them on because I wanted to go do it. And then I had to break down and buy myself some Vibram Five Fingers, some KSOs from
Mhm.
way back in the day, and they were phenomenal. And I ran in them everywhere, and I loved them. Like, they were great. It was just a really cool concept. They look weird and they smell 50 times worse because it's like a sock. It's like your only pair of socks, and you can wash them once a week. It's bad, and I'm not bagging on people that like the Five Fingers. They have a great utility, and it's
Mhm.
been something that's really cool. So I really appreciate them. And but what happened for me was Merrill had the trail glove, so it was like I figured this thing out around October,
Mhm.
and then that following spring 2011, I believe, I think it was 2011. Um, Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Merrill came out with the trail glove, an incredible shoe, absolutely incredible, and they've destroyed it since. Really sad.
Ooh. Mm.
And then after that, it was like coming out to springtime and later spring, and I'm like, flip flop's not going to work anymore. And so that's where I did find Luna sandals, and then I
Mhm.
bought a pair of their. They had this model called the Equus, and it was so cool. It was just 6 millimeters of Vibram um, Moreflex, which we sell in our chargers and our um, in like our supers, and we use it in a lot of places. But it's really neat material, and it was just a piece of a 5/8 wide elastic strap that was covered in leather, You tie a knot under the toe hole, and then you wind it through and tie it around your foot with a bow. And it looked, I'm not here to disparage anyone, but it did not look super manly to have a little bow on the front of your foot. And sometimes, these things would last about 30 miles, and then the knot under your toe, in the toe hole, would wear out. And sometimes, like, I found myself one time at a county fair, Santa Cruz County Fair, like, oh no, my sandal broke. And I had to like take my teeth and rip this thing after I've been marching through the fair and retie it. And, but the thing that happened for me was that had initially when I heard this concept, all I wanted to do, I understood the barefoot thing, but I was like running, 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 running. I want to run. I want to run better. Running is the foundation. Like, you walk and you run. You sleep too. Those are like really big pieces of your life. And I wanted the running piece, as somebody who loves sports, to be better. So it's like all I wanted to do, and I got into it. I loved it. All of a sudden, my stride shortened, and my foot strike was better, and I could breathe while I was running. And I went from somebody who only ran because he was trying to date his wife, initially, like in the courting process, to hey, I want to run. Hey, do you want to run with me? And I would take people, and the conversations, all of it, just wonderful. And the adventure of running. And so I'd be out there, and then, I was like going between KSOs and Trail Glove, and now I was running a little bit in the sandals. And more I'd like be out at Wilder Ranch, and I found myself like miles out there. I'm like, should I be doing this? Should my feet be uncovered? Is this safe? That kind of thinking. And after a while, I was like, this is stupid. Of course they should be. I love it. It culminated at the end of that summer. My wife and I, we went on our anniversary. It was our 7-year anniversary. We went to Tahoe, and we had this trip. It's like a big moment for me. It was this great trip, and we hiked into Emerald Bay, from to this place called Vikings Home. It was like a 2-mile hike, and I'm wearing the sandals. We swam. You throw the sandals off and you go swimming and you throw them back on. We ran 4.5 miles up the Rubicon Trail, and then on the coast, and then we come back. That's 9 miles, and we like stop and swim, and it's just like incredible. It's 85 degrees out. There's white sand beaches. You're in the Sierras. Like, what could be better? And then you hike back out, and the whole trip was like close to 14 miles, and there's swimming and this and that. And I'm like, this is what I like to do.
That's
And I
amazing.
wore the sandals, and it's like, this is all you need. So, and obviously you can go with less, and I appreciate those people that are capable of that. I always tell people, barefoot is better than my sandals. It's the best thing for you. I have no qualms.
Well, I mean, and the fact is like, it's just, I think one of the things that we forget is that there's a large spectrum between barefoot and the most beautiful
Yeah.
natural shoe, right? Is that like, I'm the same way. Like I mean, I ran my first, I think we talked about this when I visited you. I ran my first half-mile barefoot last year. I haven't really done much since. And but my knee is healing, and I'm in the process of really like restoring like hip and knee and foot health. And I think eventually I will get to, and I'm plan on running barefoot because of the fact that it's so different. Like just being barefoot, the spectrum between being barefoot to the most minimalist natural shoe is a world of difference. And so
Yeah.
we don't really talk about that so much, like how important it is to have strong, resilient bare feet, even before you kind of transition to a natural shoe, if possible, if you have like chronic injuries and such. But
Do you want to talk about that in a minute? Like, I just don't know how much time you have, but I'd love to talk about that.
well, I don't want to, I mean, I definitely think we should just finish like our
Okay.
conversation and go and answer the questions. And if it's too long, people can turn it off, or we'll
Okay.
figure it out.
So
But
do you want me to
before,
answer that one? I have a
yeah,
thought on
yes,
that.
yes. Let's go, let's say we'll go 10, 15 more minutes.
Sure.
And then
Okay.
we'll be like, we'll go there.
Okay. So there are a lot of No, can you see me very well?
I can.
Okay, good. I can't tell because my computer. So there, like, I want to say that there's a big change that happens when somebody runs barefoot, and it is a real thing. It's it's uh, it's something that is quantifiable, and there's actually a lot of information out there on it. And some people are like, "Is it placebo? You know, what is it?" Right? It's not. It is not. Now you can fail at it, you can mess up, you can do a bad job with the technique or whatever. But in general, it kind of goes back to that principle we talked about earlier with pain. Um, Pain is going to guide you into. It's going to help you do your citizen research, right? It's going to help you along that path. And what it does is the main things that it does, that we'll start with, is that it's going to shorten the length of your stride. You can't land too far out in front of your body, like on your heel, like you can with a big padded heel. So I think shoe companies do three major things that hurt people. There's more that they do, but the big three would be the raised heel, because a human, if you needed more padding under your heel, you just would have been born with it. Pretty simple. The next thing, it's called a medial post or arch support. It interrupts what the arch does. The arch's job, it's just a leaf spring. It's a structure of muscles, tendons, ligaments, bones, and its job is to compress with each step. So when you put a spring under under load, right, you're getting energy there. That's potential energy. And so it's your first initial shock absorber that's hitting the ground, and you cut it out. So that's
Hmm.
not good. And then the other thing is, like, a healthy foot wants to spread out, it wants to
Hmm.
splay. And I think of that distributing the force of the impact. Um, it also allows your, like, the worst thing is your big toe is going to like jut in towards the
Hmm.
center of your foot. And if you do that, you're going to drive off another part of your foot, which will cause all kinds of problems. The big toe is the only one that's structurally strong enough to drive off of. So those are the big problems with shoes. And there's a lot of other ones too.
Yeah.
But I'd say those are the major ones. In any case, the next thing that happens besides your stride being shortened, so, and with a shorter stride, you're more likely to have a quicker um, steps per minute. You'll get closer to that 180. So there's that. If you land in front of yourself, like on your heel, you're in a braking position. I see people do that, and just running in the shoes, and now you've lost that energy from the arch, compressing and releasing. You're losing important energy, and they're just
Yeah.
like sweating. They're drenched with sweat. They're breathing hard. They can barely move, and it's like, and they're bent over. It's like,
Yes.
stand up tall and just pad along. You'll be surprised how comfortable it is.
It
Not,
made me realize, it made me realize something as you were talking, Josh, is that the difference between even like as beautiful as the Shamma sandal is and going barefoot, and I'm not suggesting that people just run barefoot, but I think this is the difference. The difference is that having a shoe on is an intellectual process.
yeah,
Having your shoe off is a very human, like it's like a very subconscious process. You will not F yourself up because
yeah,
your nervous system will kick in
yeah,
and take care of business for you, and you will have to stop if you're doing something wrong. Whereas even when I put the Shamma sandal on, or when I put my thinnest feel grounds on, or the thinnest,
yeah,
stack height I have, my gait pattern is different. And then the one thing I want to say about no matter how beautiful the natural shoe, when you said something about how your toes want to splay, that's, I feel like I've been just reborn because my my toes in sandals, my big toe is like, oh, so happy. Whereas
yeah,
even in my best possible natural shoe, it goes back, it reverts back to its old habit of
yeah,
wanting to go in just because of the nature of it being enclosed. Even if
yeah.
there's enough room, and if I wear my toe spreaders, it's different. But I think that's the biggest difference is when you take off your shoes and try running or walking or something, it is not, it's a subconscious, not, it's a subconscious process, not an intellectual one.
And I think even one of the things I want to point out there too is, like, the problem, I've heard this before, and I really appreciate this, going back to this broader discussion about science, is that um, science, again, uh, the more we learn, again, we like why we kind of like sum it up in an idea like doubt. Like it creates doubt because you're supposed to be skeptical about your new findings, right? Like you do. I've read tons of journal articles over the years. You know, when I was doing my marriage family therapy, getting that degree and my psych minor and all that, you know, you go and read articles. So somebody does research and then you put that research out and then it gets scrutinized, right? That's just the process. It's good. It's a good thing. But the more we understand about science, it creates more variables. And now we've
Right.
just fed like, okay, we got, let's just say we found like 10 new variables, new things. Now we have to add those to all the other variables. And so
Yep.
science actually runs away from us. The more like
Yes.
think we know, well, there's just the deeper it goes. I like to think about this like, sure, there was, I forget, we had protons and electrons and we had neutrons in the atom when I was a kid, and then they found quarks, and then there's like new subatomic particles, and I'm sure there's new particles below those. I don't know when
Mhm.
they'll find them. I don't even care, but
Yeah.
it'll happen. And the same thing like with a cell. We originally thought that a cell was just a glob of goo, and we were built of that. And then it's like, you know, as a kid, you're taking your science class and you can see how the cell has all these parts inside of it. Well, did you know that some of the parts inside of the cell like make other parts? And then they fit together in 3D. And then I don't know what's next. They'll find it out and that's fine. But the point is, like you said, the intellectual experience of the shoe, we think we've solved the problem. And that's like modernity in a nutshell. It's like, well, we've got the swoop on the side and we've got the flashy reflectors and there's an arch support. Like the amount the foot is so dynamic and able to deal with so many surfaces and situations, it's insane. And then the shoe designer's like, well, we came up with one or two situations it can deal with.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. You bring me back to, because when I was in grad school, I did not appreciate why I was there. I was doing like what you talked about, the next thing, just kind of going
Yeah.
along the path, like this is what I do next. But I actually had an amazing research methods class, and I was in Long Beach, California, and we had this incredible um, group of professors, and when we were doing research, I had the opportunity to work in the VA hospital in neuroplasticity. And I remembered that I never thought I would like statistics or research methods. But I was so confused because it was like every time we would read the articles, like Dr. LaCourse would always say, like the idea is to create new questions, like to ask the better questions,
Yeah.
right? So that like we would be in the lab and I'd be like, well, when is it going to be over? Like, when are we going to get, what is the conclusion? Like, why is the conclusion not the conclusion? And then it would just be like, we would be recreating. I remember thinking like, this is bogus. We just keep recreating the same study over and over again.
Yeah.
But now in my later life, I'm like, well, that was actually really good. That was
Yeah.
actually really good science. And that my instructors, my professors said the goal of science is to continue to ask better questions. And I was like,
Yeah.
what? This is blowing my mind.
Well, so that's wonderful. And again, I really think everybody you can go so far just asking questions of yourself and of your experience. What am I going through? What, like, again, as a therapist, you know, your job, and especially people like with anxiety, you know, PTSD, all that kind of stuff, they go through these panic modes and these difficult situations. And a good therapist is like teaches them to observe themselves while they're going through those situations so they can manage it, because they have to help the person become stronger because they can't make those feelings go away or make life go away. You have to become better at dealing with life, like your foot has to. I wanted to say something about the second piece. So I was talking about stride length, and here's the other one. You hear this term, and these are hard terms to like fight against or a trend to buck. but one of the big terms is foot strike. It's a big deal. I actually think that foot strike is wrong. I think that actually we should be talking about how your foot lands. It's a landing. So what happens when you're barefoot? And this is the thing, like, I really think it's a spectrum. So the faster you're running, the more your foot is going to land. Well, just pretend this is my hand is at my foot. There's my big toe, and here's my pinky toe. We actually, when we're sprinting, we're going to land just behind the pinky toe on the forefoot. And so, and then the slower we go, we're going to go back towards the heel. And the interesting thing is that you can get really far back towards the heel and still be landing on the metatarsal. So you're still actually in the middle of the foot technically. We don't land on the heel. That's not something we do when we run. So running is like everything from a trot up to full on sprinting. And we have three basic modes of movement. Like a horse is amazing. A horse has 4 modes of movement. I think it's like walk, trot, canter, and run, or whatever, gallop. So they actually have 4 distinguishable modes. And but the way we work is and then the other thing that's crazy is, so when you're running, it's like front to back, and when you're walking, it's back to front, which is mind blowing if you really think about it. And I think there's a 2-phase hitch to walking to propel ourselves. But besides that, I did want to say that, so we want to think about landing. And we are actually, like, reason I say the pinky toe is because we're going to land towards the outside of the foot. That's the arch is building. Your foot is getting ready. It's like getting itself set to meet the ground. But when it meets the ground, our job is really to match the angle, like a plane coming into land. We're not like striking, we're actually landing. You will strike if you're wearing footwear, if you're going through the, hey, I have the solution, I have the answer. But each step requires a graceful, thoughtful landing, right? Every time the
Yes.
plane comes down, it's got to, like, you don't want to crash, you got to do this right. And so we have all these feedback loops that are set up that'll help us do that. And so the culmination of it is that when people run with shoes on, and I can't do it with my wrist, our foot goes to 90 degrees, my wrist will not. But if this is my foot, your foot is more likely to stay in, it's called dorsiflexion, where it's up. And people will literally run in like this check marked pattern, and their foot doesn't come out of dorsiflexion when they have a big shoe on. And the reason is, if you've ever run on a trampoline, like if you ever been at somebody's house and you're just goofing around on a trampoline, you might like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you just kind of like horsing around and you run back and forth on it, or you're chasing a little kid, whatever. You will run straight legged, more straight legged than you would if you were on the ground on a hard surface. So basically what's happening is your brain's like, hey, we're going to hit something really squishy, and unless we find something firm, we can't start, we're falling still. So we're like, oh, we're falling. And so your brain knows that you're in this big padded shoe, and it keeps itself straighter than it should be. It maintains dorsiflexion instead of dropping out of dorsiflexion and landing. And so it's a noticeable difference in experience. Now, some of you out there, if you're listening, your first time you do this, you're gonna be like, oh, it hurts. Yeah, because you're probably running, walking, or whatever, like you did with your big shoes on. And it takes about a half mile or a mile for your brain to like calm down, your feet to relax, and then your body like takes over. It's like, oh, thank you. And then you relax, and you can run on a hard surface all you want.
Yeah.
That's the difference. So those two pieces, the shorter strides and all that, they're important, and the proper landing and coming out of dorsiflexion. And essentially, you just need to stay tall and relax. And then
Yeah.
the pain feedback will take care of us after that.
my gosh, there's there's a lot in there. There's Jeff Shub is part of our Foot Collective crew, and he is called the Barefoot guy, or I forget. I'm forgetting, but his name is Jeff Shub, and what he once said. So this comes back to everything you're saying, kind of circles back to us going too fast, right?
Yeah.
And that like we're not. So why I bring up Jeff Shub is when I very first joined the Foot Collective as a student, he would talk to us about like our egos, and I remember thinking, who is this guy? And he would say, he said something that triggered me, because he was saying like anything that you, it just seemed so illogical to me, because like you were talking about how you had to have your feet clean and your shoes on, and they were tools to make you perform the way that you wanted to perform.
Yeah.
And his argument was like anything that you can't do outside of your shoes is your ego. And not that that's, you just need to keep that in check, right? So like we use tools, like elite athletes use tools in order to do unnatural things with their bodies, and we have to remember that. And then what you're talking about with running is we're not in life, well, we always want to perform better, so we're always creating technology to help us do what humans do, which is innovate, which is brilliant. But
Yeah.
also I think we get so caught up in like the speed and the pace. Like Matthew and I we lived in France for 2 years. We got back, we loved where we lived. We used public transportation. We decided to ditch the car, and it's been 15 years since we did that, which required, and people everywhere. I mean, we've moved from city to city in car grid Los Angeles, and we're now in Mobile, Alabama, that doesn't have a public transportation system that would be like doable for usually any human, but we're committed to going slower and knowing our people in our neighborhood and knowing who the post office person is. And it's not a life of speed, and that requires you to live differently. And I think, to bring it back to, you're talking about how our bodies work and our landing, it's like, well, you probably aren't going to be the biggest speedster that you want to be when you do that, because it requires you to slow down, pay attention, and listen to the signals in your body, which we have a habit of overriding with everything, with caffeine, with sodas, with pharmaceuticals, with everything in our lives. We don't want to slow down. And so
I think you can, well, going back to the performance thing really quick, I think you can go pretty fast barefoot or minimalist. I think you really can. You think about the fastest people in the world, Usain Bolts and all them, their shoes are just razor thin with some spikes on it. They have the spikes, granted. I'm not saying there isn't any there, but yeah, I think um maybe I'll make another point. I find this study really fascinating. So I think that our culture is like way over sexualized, big time. And I think everyone's finally maybe coming to that conclusion. I don't want to, I'm a pastor and all that, so you might think he's got all this baggage against sex or whatever. That's not my point here. It's that the thing that the culture runs after, right? And it's the thing that you go after, usually you can't get, and you lose in the process. So there's this fascinating study about sexuality, or the amount of times people have sex, uh, just, and they've done these huge surveys for decades, and that number's been dropping and declining and declining. And it's like, well, what? We've got more and more, pornography. We've got more and more, illicit material. Well, and I just think it's fascinating, because the more of that they get, the less they have. It's just like slips through their fingers.
Yeah.
And so my point is that if you look, again, something that's super alarming to me is just how generally unhealthy people are.
Yeah.
Look at obesity is just a major problem. And so you think, well, maybe I can be a little faster. I could be a little better if I have these shoes, but it's actually like working the opposite. People are just less healthy. You go faster and maybe you end up going slower, is kind of my point.
Right.
And so that's one of my concerns. Again, I want, I don't know why I'm talking about this on your podcast, but I want people to have, people to have more sex. I want them to be closer.
Yes, intimacy.
Intimacy.
Because I think there's an inverse relationship between being hyper like looking at hyper-sexualized content everywhere we go, and intimacy, right? Those are
Yeah.
two very different things.
I want people to be in love with each other and have time for each other. Simple.
Yeah,
The
takes
more they
time,
have,
and that
does.
takes time.
Yeah. And they will be much more fulfilled that way.
Yeah. So the reason why you're having this conversation with us is because having a foot conversation is a whole body conversation.
It sure is. Absolutely. And like,
Um,
dude, really quick, we talked at the beginning. I mentioned that movie I watched. I don't think we recorded that part, but
mm-mm,
that's how we communicate. We tell stories to each other, and enough stories, you hear enough stories, and you go, you know what? I think I'm going to give this thing a try. I'm going to try it for myself.
mhm,
And, or enough stories, and you go, yeah, there's a problem with X, Y, or Z. I think I'm going to stay away from that.
mhm.
And we need to do that. And the big story I want people to hear is, you've been born with wonderful equipment. Use it. Be human. Um, get healthy, and then be in relationship with people, and sort of regain your humanity, because modernity is like, uh, we're it's like running out of rope, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It's gotten ugly, and we're gonna lose ourselves in it. you know,
yeah,
let's not even bring up AI and any of that stuff that's
yeah.
going on. It's like, be a human. That's your job right now. So,
Well, let's wrap it up there.
sure.
Thank you, Josh, so much for going down all those rabbit holes and spending the time with us. And maybe we can do it again sometime.
I would love that. It's been
Okay,
a pleasure, Ruth. It's a joy talking to you.
likewise. Thank you for listening, TFC friends, and we will catch you in the next episode. Ciao for now.